But when that world opens up to you, you see that it's more than just Dungeons and Dragons, you know, Call of Cthulhu. You know, you have hope. And you're like, so I don't just have to do that. You know, the OSR movement comes out and you're like, okay, so I don't have to just do modern this. And everyone's hacking this and hacking that. And so, you know, it became a little easier for me to wrap my head around. And that's kind of what got me to the dance. And the other thing was the pandemic. The pandemic was kind of a, you know, I call it a come to Jesus moment for a lot of people.
Hi, welcome to the Dieku Podcast. I'm Gary Snow. Today, I welcome John Hambone McGuire, who is one of the co-creators of 3-2-1 Action System, along with Geo Collazo, and he is also the co-host of the Vintage RPG podcast with Stu Horvath, and he is also the official ambassador of the Swamps of New Jersey. So, John, welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Gary. That was a very, very cool introduction. Yes, I am the ambassador of the Swamps of New Jersey. There's a lot more than you think. A lot of bodies buried there, allegedly.
Allegedly. What's the big famous mobster? Or not union guy? Who's
so
John Gotti?
Allegedly, Jimmy Hoffa is buried under the goalpost at Giant Stadium, which is now MetLife Stadium. But truthfully, when they tore down the one to make the other, they would have found him if he was there. You know.
Okay.
I don't think anyone would have done that sloppy of a job, especially because it's lime pits, allegedly.
Well, I'm a big fan of the podcast, and I really like the 3-2-1 Action System. So we're going to talk all about that and all the games that you've been creating under that system. But first of all, how did you get started in this crazy little hobby of ours?
So for me, I started playing Dungeons and Dragons when I was 25, and it only took so long because I remember when I was like 19. The first time I got an offer to join, I got like so excited about it. But the person I was dating at the time was like, I don't want you doing that because then I have to tell my friends you're a nerd. And at that point I was like, well, you're the first person who likes seeing me without my clothes on. So I'm going to go with what you say on this, darling. Obvious mistake, but you know, I always kind of wanted to get into it. And, you know, years later, Geo, I became friends with Geo and our friend Sean, and I ended up working at the same record store that Stu did, which is around the corner from where I live now, where Stu lives. And it was interesting because, you know, they're like, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. You know, they hadn't played in a while. It'd been a while since they had like a regular game going, but I had a house and I had a big dining room at the time. So we started playing in my dining room, you know, and of course, like they told me like what they expected. So I had pizza, I had Doritos, I had like different kinds of donuts. I mean, I put out like a, you know, major motion picture craft services level spread for my friends to play Dungeons and Dragons. And I think all we did that night was like create characters. But even from the character creation, I came in at 3-5. I was hooked. And then, you know, I got my dice tattooed on my arm. Like
oh, wow. Full commitment.
Yeah.
And so I guess obviously for those that are probably watching this, most of us are like fans of the games, but is there anything in particular that like jumped out at you as far as like, or surprised you coming in later into the gaming that you went, I had no idea that it would be this much fun?
Yeah. I mean, you know, now we have things like Stranger Things, which in Critical Role and things where people have a very certain idea of what the hobby is. And it's almost kind of deemed as cool. And there's like a good vibe and an energy around it where like, you know, when I was growing up, you know, it was like the satanic panic was happening. They finally just started putting like, you know, parental advisory stickers on records. And, you know, it was more dangerous back then. It was more like, you know, if you play Dungeons and Dragons, you might get possessed by the devil, you know, like real, you know, stuff that just not founded or rooted in any kind of like truth or like anything. But that's how it was. And by the time I got to it, like everyone's like, yeah, it wasn't that bad. Like no one's going to possess you. Like, you know, we don't do those kind of rituals at the table. We don't like to role play that much. But, you know, it was just so much fun. Like I think the thing that really drew me into it more than anything, it's not game mechanic, it's not style of play, it's not the cool pictures in the monster manual. it's the fun, it's the camaraderie, it's the spending time with your friends, and like, you know, trying to do something ridiculous to try to pop your buddy and get them to like break character, and like, you know, the jokes and, you know, the friendship that comes along with playing RPGs, which was something that, you know, while I was committed to playing music, I mean, I've been a musician my entire life, and I was in serious bands at the time, and really trying to, you know, I'm doing air quotes here for people who are listening on the audio, make it. But, you know, it's a different kind of camaraderie. You know, that's more like you're in a gang and it's you against the world, and you're constantly desperate and struggling. Whereas like, you know, playing Dungeons and Dragons, my buddies, like, we're hanging out, we're having some laughs, we're eating pizza, we're like goofing off. And like every time they would leave my house or I would leave the house we were playing at, man, I felt lighter. I felt good. You know, I'm having a bad day, a couple hours of rolling dice with my friends. I'm like, oh, whatever. It's fine. It's stupid. Like, who cares? Like, you know, I got turned into jelly by like a minotaur, you know, like there are worse ways to die.
And you mentioned working at the record store and your music career. What kind of music or genre did you play?
Oh, I played everything, man. Right now I play in an outlaw country band called Secret Country. We're a bunch of old punk rock kids who play, you know, outlaw country at a reasonably faster speed. But, you know, we play all, you know, we have, but they've been a band for like well over 10 or so years. I've been in the band for about 6. There's a ton of records. And, you know, when we do covers, we play stuff like Merle Haggard and, you know, Waylon Jennings and, you know,
like classic country stuff.
Real, you know, real country stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I came up playing punk rock. I played in a band called Pensy Prep, which was like right there in the early emo scenes in the early 2000s. I played in punk bands. I played in goth bands. I played in hardcore bands, which, you know, that's not really me, but I did it. You know, and now I play country, you know, heavy metal. I've done it all.
Cool. And when did you get the name Hambone? Oh,
I was 21-ish, maybe. My buddy Frank, there's now conflicting versions of the story, because, you know,
like any good lore, it's got
it's like any good lore, it's got different versions of it. But my buddy Frank and Sean, I did a really short form podcast with them called Casual Interactions, where you know, we talked about our time together when we were playing in Pensy Prep and coming up and playing music together. But their version of the Hambone origin story and my version of the Hambone origin story are similar but yet different, you know. And like, I was partying hard, man. I had a long weekend, lasted about 2 decades, so I might be a little bit of an unreliable narrator when it comes to certain things. But yeah, I mean, I tell the whole story over there. It's, I don't know if it's exactly family friendly, but it has moments. But yeah, I've been Hambone, you know, 23 years.
Well, excellent nickname. Goes along with the official ambassador title very well.
Gotta have a good gimmick, man.
Yeah. And I also have to, before we get into the game stuff, I know that you're a wrestling mark as well, which I am too. So that was one of those things, just like D&D. I had to keep on the down low and speak of in hushed tones. You only let certain people know that you're a wrestling fan as you got older.
You know, it's so weird because, you know, I think that is a generational wrestling fan thing, you know, because, you know, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and then like I fell off it for a while, and like you wouldn't talk about it. Like, you know, essentially, you know, by the time the Attitude Era wrapped up, you know, a few years after that, everyone's like, no, I don't watch wrestling. That's for kids and whatever. But then like suddenly everyone, I want to say maybe around like 2012, stopped putting on airs and stopped trying to be too cool for school. And we're like, God, I love professional wrestling. And like, you know, you start watching it again, and you're a little older now. You're like, I'm going to go, maybe I'll pay to go see a show. Who knows? Like, I'll go to see like a house show. Then you go and you have like the most fun ever. And you forget what the sound is like when a dude takes a bump on that mat, and how it cracks and it echoes through the building. You're like, oh, this is great. And there's an energy behind that. So yeah, you know, I fell off it for a while. I got back into it. 2012, I was a traveling salesman, if you could believe that. Driving solo around the country, you know, making towns. And I started watching Monday Night Raw again because I was like, I should not be in a bar on a Monday night after I'd been there on a Sunday. I'm going to be there on a Tuesday. So it was my way of being like, okay, I'm going to be responsible. I'm going to, eat this whole pizza and watch Monday Night Raw. And I came back in, I want to say like right around the Shield, and I haven't stopped since, and I kind of fell off watching WWE because it just got too like, it just wasn't good for a long time. And I got into AEW, got into like independent wrestling and, New Japan, Ring of Honor, all that. Like I just started, moving away from just watching, Monday Night Raw. And I love it. And like, I love old wrestling, probably better than I like new wrestling, Dusty Rhodes, Hard Times. My four horsemen, Dusty Rhodes, Ric Flair, they're on my Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, totally. And I'm from Calgary, so that's the Heart Foundation, Heart Wrestling here in Calgary, and so I grew up on Stampede Wrestling, and it was like one of those things that we didn't talk about, but it was like every Saturday afternoon I totally watched Stampede Wrestling. It was just like the go-to thing that I did. But when all my other friends started to kind of like not watch it anymore, I was like, what's wrong with me? And same with D&D. I was one of those holdouts that I was like, no, I'll keep playing in high school, and everybody else was chasing girls and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I was chasing girls, I was playing music, but I think that generationally, and I can't speak to your experience being in Canada, but like in the United States, a lot of it was like, you need to grow out of doing this, that, and the other thing. You need to like grow up and go to college and get a job and do all this other stuff. And like, I think my generation was one of the last generations that would be true for, or like that kind of thinking would be considered to be true for, because now it's like, I could do whatever I want. Like, I don't need to go to college. I don't need to stop playing Dungeons and Dragons. I don't need to stop chasing my dreams. And like, I can pivot. Like I can do something else. So I know a lot of people who were really passionate and really into things into their early 20s, try to give it up, try to go and like, move in a very traditional, A to B direction. And it just wasn't for them. They end up going back to the well, man. It's hard to get something out of your blood that is just so deeply in it.
Cool. And then, getting back to the game stuff, when did you first get the inkling that, hey, I want to design something? Like, because it's also like, it's designing a game is kind of split into two things. There's always like, your adventure designer or GM, and you're coming up with ideas for like what you want to do. But then it gets into, well, now I got to maybe make mechanics to go along with my story. And like, how does that all work for you?
So it's a great question. I always wanted to write. I've always been like my dream to write, so much so. And I've told this story before, but I would be remiss not to mention that on my grandmother's deathbed, she imparts some stuff to me, some stuff that is personal and is not to be told to the world. But one thing, she looks at me and she says, your future is in writing. Go write. And I was like, I was like, well, she's like, no, she's like, you should be writing. She's like, that's what you're meant to do. Go write. And I was like, okay. Cause like, what do you say to that? Like, what do you say to that? But I didn't do it for like a bunch of years after, but I would try sporadically here and there. I went to Gen Con a bunch of times, and I would go to writing seminars with Geo, who's my partner in 3-2-1 Action. And, I would always try to write, and I'd have these ideas, and I would never feel like I was good enough to do it. When I first started playing D&D and RPGs, I didn't dungeon master for like the first like 5 years I played, because I was intimidated by it. I was like, there's too much to know, and like this, that, and the other thing. And then like, once I finally started doing it, I really liked it. And then over time, I got real loosey-goosey with the rules, because I was just like, this is just supposed to be fun. Mm-hmm. I don't want to open that book and read. I don't want to read it. So like, I found ways to kind of make it my own. And then once I started doing that, I was like, okay, maybe I could write an adventure. And like, I got the tools off the DMs Guild and this, that, and the other thing. And I was trying to like put something together, and it would just never work for me. And like, because writing is hard. Like, don't ever let anyone tell you that it like, oh, anyone could do it. No, writing is hard. And like anything else, you got to do it a lot to get better at it. And I just, where I was in my life, man, I wasn't there, that I was mentally ready to go all in and put all in on it. So I just didn't do it. I'd start here and there. I'd have ideas, story ideas, and I'd start things. I wouldn't stop things. And like, also I just kind of wasn't sold on just writing like D&D. And then, you know, as I started doing like the Vintage RPG podcast, it was great because I started experiencing like a wide palette of different styles of games where like, I got Cthulhu. I found like there was a Western game, Star Wars. You could have the Marvel superhero game. You have like cool indie games that like people making zines. And I was like, people are still making zines. Like we were doing that in the 90s for like music. And it's like a whole world opened up. And, you know, Honey Heist, which I still maintain is one of the greatest games ever written. But when that world opens up to you, you see that it's more than just Dungeons and Dragons, you know, Call of Cthulhu. You know, you have hope. And you're like, so I don't just have to do that. You know, the OSR movement comes out and you're like, okay, so I don't have to just do modern this. And everyone's hacking this and hacking that. And so, you know, it became a little easier for me to wrap my head around. And that's kind of what got me to the dance. And the other thing was the pandemic. The pandemic was kind of a, you know, I call it a come to Jesus moment for a lot of people where now everything has changed. Now everything is different. The world ended as we knew it for a period of time. And I know a lot of people who came out different. I know a lot of people who, you know, were forced to face not only their own mortality, but their own like ideas of who they were and the people that they wanted to be. And like, you know, the ability to now like hit that reset button and like, I don't have to walk out that door in 3 years the same person I am when I shut that door from the world. And, you know, I was one of those people. Yeah, I had just quit drinking a little while before then. I'm going to be 4 years sober on Friday.
Oh, congrats.
Thank you. Great. And, you know, I also like, you know, I'm white knuckling it through the early stages of sobriety. I'm running games constantly for people on Discord because I want to try to do something when, you know, we all felt powerless. So I created like a little island on my Discord where I would just invite anybody. If you ever wanted to play an RPG, you can come over, hang out. I ran for so many people never played again. A lot of people, it got them into playing RPGs. A lot of people were happy just to kind of have 2 hours to goof off and have some laughs and just, you know, shut their brain off from like the chaos that was happening in the world. So through doing that, I realized that, you know, and do not get me wrong, I love 5th edition D&D. If there are dungeons and there are dragons, I am very much interested in whatever you're about to tell me. However, even though it's supposed to be and sold as easy for anyone to pick up and learn, there's still a decent sized barrier of entry to getting into that. And I wanted to start making a game that would be easy for anyone to play. And I in my brain, I thought, well, you know, generic role-playing Cthulhu style system is great. And I started building, you know, 3-2-1 action off of that. The real thing, though, that set me down the path was, you know, in the pandemic, I'm upstairs with Jen and George, Geo, my partner in 3-2-1 action. And at the time, Jen had a podcast called Notorious Narratives. And she was telling me the story about Point Nemo. And I was like, oh, man, that sounds amazing. And my idea brain starts going. And I was like, wow, I said, what if we did, you know, you could do this island, blah, 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 blah. I was like, oh, man, maybe someone could write that into like a comic book someday or a game. And she just looks at me and she says, Hambone, you could write that. And I was like, oh, I can't write. I've always tried to write, but I never could write. And she's like, Hambone, you can do it. And I was like, yeah. And then I went downstairs and I sat at this desk where I'm doing the interview with you now. And I was like, I have to do this. And so I did. I started writing Escape from Point Nemo. And I had I was using the D100 system. And that's how it started. And I wanted it to be simple. And I was showing it to Geo. And Geo was like, well, if you really want it to be simple, drop the 0. Just make it a D10 system. And then that was it. And from then on in, you know, once I had written, I think, the first 50 or so pages, I brought him in to be a part of it. Because we've been working on stuff together for decades. And however, I had a really bad track record of saying I was going to write and wanting to write and then never actually like ponying up. So I had to prove that I could do it myself before I brought him in to make him a part of it. And so when I did, we were going to launch for Zine Quest. And so he said, well, instead of doing Escape from Point Nemo as the thing, we just want to do a zine. Let's do a prequel. So we came up with Rocket to Russia.
Cool. And I mean, you mentioned Honey Heist, and I have to agree with you 100% there. When I saw that, I was inspired to like start tinkering around with writing, because it was so accessible and so like, hey, I could do my own Honey Heist and then maybe grow from something.
Yeah.
Like that. It was just like, it was something special. So I think it became accessible for like a lot of people to go like, that's all an RPG can be.
In no way to diminish it, because, you know, for those who may not be familiar with Honey Heist, and you should absolutely buy Honey Heist, it's a double-sided piece of paper. And that was a huge moment for me, because I was like, oh, we got to play Honey Heist. And I was like trying to find it. And like, I found it, and I was like going to buy it. And I was like, this looks like someone just hand wrote this and just whatever, Xerox it. And they're like, no, that's Honey Heist. And so I got it, and I was like, this is a game? This could be a game? It's a piece of paper. And I was like, well, damn, I guess what's my excuse now? You know?
Yeah, it was inspiring. I think there's a lot of people in the same boat as us when we saw that and went, it's accessible. I can do this too. But then 3, 2, 1 action came, where like the mechanism you talked about it being a D10, but you specifically kind of honed it around this cinematic storytelling. So It's fast, easy to pick up, easy to learn, and just a D10.
Right. Yeah. I mean, listen, Geo's kind of a genius when it comes to like a lot of stuff. And he was right, because when he said, just drop the 0, I looked at my goddaughter, who at the time, I don't know, she was 2, 3, maybe. And she watched Sesame Street and watching all these children's educational programs. And like, you know, what's the one thing you learn on Sesame Street? Your ABCs, 1, 2, 3s. And I was thinking about it, you know, and I know it seems like a broad generalization, but most people can count to 10 and add or subtract 1, 2, or 3 from 10. And I was like, when he said drop the 0, it was so elegant in its simplicity. And at first I was like, I don't know, it's a D100 system. He's like, well, what if you drop the 0 and just make 1 dice for everything? And I was like, it's kind of the perfect idea, because I've definitely played with people who, you know, look, we all love the D20, the most iconic dice of all time. You know, you see a picture of a D20, you know you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, or it's a role-playing game of some kind. However, I've definitely played with people who, when presented with multiple dice in front of them, just the basic 7, would constantly, what do I roll now? What do I roll now? What do I roll now? Like, you know, and you're like, it's the D20. Most of everything is a D20, but, you know, you can't presume or project what a person's level of comfort is, or what you would expect their level of comfort playing the game would be. So doing it off a single D10, it kind of like, you know, it makes it easier, and it takes a lot of the guesswork out, because you literally have 1 dice. You have to add or subtract 1, 2, or 3 and roll at or below your stat. That's it.
Well, I mean, there's some people that I've had on the show like that design games, and one of the reasons that they've designed the game that they have is they hated math. And so you start getting into these complex mechanisms, and then, you know, going back to the Honey Heist and how simple it can be. And really at the core of a lot of games is the collaborative storytelling, and how you can make a story out of just some simple mechanics and a story hook and go from there.
Yeah, I mean, truly the most accessible dice is the D6, you know, because, you know, it's Christ left Pittsburgh. D6 has been the chosen dice. Any kind of board game, Milton Bradley, whatever, it's a D6. However, you know, for what we wanted to do and what we needed to do, we needed to use the D10. Which, you know, if you're into RPGs, you're going to have a D10, but a D10 is pretty easy to do and find if you need one. And also, there's digital dice rollers now. Like, you don't even have to buy dice anymore. Yeah. Perish the thought.
And so you did the prequel, Rocket to Russia. Just kind of walk us through that. And there's the cover, and I really love that top-down look, and it reminds me of Clue. I used to love those types of games, and it actually, besides Clue, there's a few other ones like that, like KGB, CIA. I don't know if you ever played those two, but those are all my favorite from a kid. You just get lost in the maps like that.
Yeah. So Rocket to Russia, I had the idea for Escape from Point Nemo, and that's what I started writing. But George was like, let's do a prequel. And I was like, okay. It's just going to be a zine. But the idea was, my idea originally was, I really want everything to be accessible for people, as best we can. So I wanted to, and remind you, I'm a first-time publisher. I wanted to make sure the rules were in every single book. So when you bought it, you didn't have to buy anything else. You'd be able to buy the book, read the rules, play the game. It's definitely a wake-up call, though, when you actually have to pay to print those rules in every book as an independent publisher, and it just adds a page count and adds more money to the layout. There's a lot to it. So we opted to make the rules free forever. No matter what we do to update them or upgrade them, you will always be able to get a PDF copy of the rules for free forever. We're not going to ever charge for the rules. I mean, if you want a physical copy of the rule book, you will have to pay. But if you want just to be able to get the rules and learn how to play the game, free forever. So the Rocket to Russia takes place 2 years before the events on the island of Point Nemo. It is a Contra Predator-esque crawl across an island. You go there under the guise of trying to take out an enemy sniper who's raising hell on this mysterious island that is run by the government, only to find out that there is much worse things than an enemy agent that you have to face down. So this particular version you have with this cover, this is actually the newer cover. The art was by my buddy Lou Morg, taken from the book. Derek Kinsman did the layout on it. But this newer version is just the adventure. The original Kickstarter version came with the rule book actually inside of the adventure as well. And that's the other thing. We're making the zine, and the next thing you know, when you have the rule book in there, it's a 100-page adventure with the rule book. So now it's got to be perfect. Now you can't even staple the darn thing. But yeah, it's you're a part of essentially a wet works team for the government sent in to do the job, and your special forces, and you run across some stuff that you were not expecting in that jungle.
And then you mentioned it's the prequel for Escape from Point Nemo. Just tell us, what is Point Nemo for those that are uninitiated?
So Point Nemo is considered to be the loneliest place on planet Earth. It is a spaceship graveyard that's the farthest distance from any land. So if there are rockets that are falling from the sky, from the space program, any kind of space debris, space junk, it's all there buried at the bottom of the ocean. So all the old spaceships and crafts and stuff, it's a spaceship graveyard essentially. But in my mind, I was like, what if an island formed there, from all the space debris? You got radiation from space and whatever kind of weird science they're doing up there. Now it's in the water and it's gotten loose, and you have this irradiated island that has formed over time. And then, of course, the government takes it over because now it just can't be there. So you're a documentary film crew led by Eli Tanzir III, who's a billionaire who wants to go and film a documentary on Point Nemo, but he has some more nefarious reasons for wanting to go there. So, your team is made up of his security force, plus an MTV VJ, a disabled veteran, a cameraman, a ship's captain named Teresa Gale, who is in her 50s. You've got a wide array of different characters who aren't your standard archetype of characters that you would play in an RPG. And it's survival. Where Rocket to Russia, you're showing up there with, automatic weapons and grenades and stuff. Here, you wreck on the island. One of you has a knife. The rest of you have to forage and find weapons on the island. And you're fighting. We created these creatures called the Amphicora, which are amphibious humanoid hybrids that are very hungry, and so they exist on the island. So you're fighting your way across the island, but it's a different overall experience. And this cover was done by my fiance Sally Canarino.
Well, and I saw that Sally has done some other stuff for you over time, and that's kind of nice to have an artist on hand.
Well, it's great. I mean, she's an amazing comic artist, just an amazing artist in general. And so she's working on Door to Door, Night by Night for Vault Comics right now. She did Human Remains. She did Final Girls, which finally is in trade. She's great. You know, she's one of the most talented people I've ever met, and she's got a really great eye for drawing monsters and gore. Really, really good stuff.
Cool. And then Children of Uma, is it in the same universe as the others, or how does it fit in? Is it like a Cloverfield type of thing where everything's connected somehow?
It's all the same world. It's all Earth. It's all, you know, a different version of our planet Earth, but it's all the same world. Uma, the ultimate military adrenalizer, is a problematic bit of science in this world. It's the thing that mutated the Amphicora. It's essentially like a mutagen. I initially came up with it because I was sitting there trying to figure out the MacGuffin, right? Have you ever seen Pulp Fiction?
Oh yeah, obviously. Yeah. Yeah. Big
influence on me. How I landed on Uma was that scene where Uma Thurman is overdosing, and John Travolta gets the adrenaline needle jams in her heart. Say something, something. You know, that's all it is. It is so stupid. It's Uma Thurman. And I'm like, well, what was the acronym? Ultimate Military Adrenalizer. So the concept was, you know, the government made this thing to keep soldiers alive on the battlefield and make them, you know, stronger, tougher, kind of like a super soldier serum. But of course, it goes horribly wrong, because why would it work? And the company that makes it is called Resolve Corporation. And so there are subsidiaries, and the Tanzir family is the overall head of Resolve Corporation. So their ripples fell through all the storylines throughout the book. So this takes place, Children of Uma, also covered by Sally. She did all the character art in this. She did all the character art in Escape from Point Nemo as well as like killer illustrations. This 2060 Kansas, there was an Amphicora war. The Amphicora had a crazy uprising, took out the coasts. There was a big war. So a lot of people move inwards to the Midwest. And, you know, food and supplies are scarce, but bullets aren't, because it's America. We will never run out of bullets. And so you are a band of kids called the Helsings. And we didn't want to call essentially what are gangs, because gangs is a negative connotation. So you're a band called the Helsings. You're a group of kids trying to find a way to survive and carve out a piece of the world for yourself. And you're doing so with electric and carbon powered vehicles. And you are, you know, constantly fighting to survive. So, you know, you start out doing a raid on that bus right there that you see in the photo. There's a convoy you're trying to rob, and then it takes you on a story where, you know, you have to fight a lot of other bands in the wasteland to eventually, you know, come to a place where you all can survive. You know, and it's essentially like Mad Max with electric cars and teenagers and no shortage of ammunition.
And then you went on to Devil in New Jersey, and maybe I'll just pause here for a second. And I can't help but notice. So, like, I mean, all of the games themselves kind of have a similar vibe to them, right? Like, it's kind of like genre-esque and kind of that 80s kind of feel, and action movies and that kind of stuff. But
right.
Have you found it hard? Because I've seen this from some other designers, that it's like, you know, when you buy a D&D book, like, it's like an endless source of, like, you can play with that D&D book forever and ever. But when you have like a specific genre and you're making kind of almost more like adventures using the same rule set, have you found that some people are like, well, I like the adventure, I like the idea of it, but it's not as it's not like a whole book that I can just run with for years?
Yes and no. Excuse me 1 second. So yes and no. I like going to the movies, right? And I love self-contained stories. Now, don't get me wrong. I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe. However, it is a little bit daunting to jump in to see a movie knowing that you need to see the 30 movies that came before, 6 TV shows, and the spin-offs to really understand what's going on. And sure, you know what's going on in that moment, but to get the richer overall experience, it's better if you have seen everything that came before, right? And I feel the same way about a lot of RPGs. You know, one of the big hurdles that people face is they want to play, but they're like, but I missed so much. You guys have been playing for years, or like there's so much history and backlog to everything that's happening here. So for me and for Geo, we like telling the idea of self-contained stories, and we like doing it with little asterisks here that, you know, each one, like Children of Uma had driving rules, right? And all it is it's the same 3-2-1 action rule set, but you're going to get like a page or two of extra rules to tack on top and nestle right in with the rule set that you're already used to playing. Devil New Jersey had horror rules, just about a page of horror rules that you get out on there. Once we get to the Western, you got a couple Western rules. But the concept is that we give you an engine that you can tell your own stories with. You know, it's not really meant for long-term campaigns, but, you know, I know a lot of people who tell me, like, this is the great palate cleanser for, like, we've been playing, like, we played this whole, you know, D&D module. Like, we did, like, a 5e, like, you know, Storm Giants Wind or whatever the one it was called. And then they were like, yeah, we've been playing this for months. We played a few sessions of yours, and then we were psyched to get back into D&D again, and because we had a great time doing it. And then, you know, we're waiting for the next module to come out. So it's something that, because we're doing so many different genres, you can now tell your own story. You can play any movie you want. If you want to do Ferris Bueller's Day Off, you can actually run Ferris Bueller's Day Off start to finish using 3-2-1 action rules. You can do Big Trouble in Little China. Same thing. It's a matter of you now having the ability as the game runner to tell the stories that you want to tell. And also, you know, yes, we are a business. At the same time, we're also in the business of making sure people have the ability to play our games. So we actually don't price things too high. You know, a soft cover version of Escape from Point Nemo, I think it's like $20. And that's 110 pages with characters, weapons, maps, side quests. Devil New Jersey is $15. It's a 70-something page book. Like, you get more than your money's worth, but we also give you an accessible point of entry. So it's not like spending like $50 on a book. You're spending $20 on a book, and you're going to have hours of enjoyment out of that.
And throughout all of this, I mean, every single one of these games that we're popping on the screen here, you've kickstarted. How has that evolution been? Like, do you remember like your first one, like hitting enter and like, you know, white knuckles, and now has it become like a little bit more familiar to you?
So I'm gonna tell you a little inside baseball here. The first Kickstarter for Rocket to Russia, I was so nervous. I had just such like terrible anxiety, and you know, I was like shaking out of my skin, and I was like, this is so bad, and I felt like I was like going crazy, getting sick, because if this fails, I'm done. It was just, you know, I can't speak to the experience of anybody else in their Kickstarters, but I know the first one that anybody runs is kind of like, oh God, you know. And it's also like, you know, I was lucky because I was able to reach out to people like Levi Combs for Planet X Games. I was able to reach out to Banana Chan, Adam Vass, people who had proven track records running Kickstarters, and pick their brains and ask for advice. And, you know, it was very successful. It was successful, and we made like enough money to cover what we needed to make, and also make a little more so we could start working on the next project. After that, it is, you know, the second or third one, it was still the second one I was still really nervous about. The third one I got a little better at. Now it's just kind of like I'm old hat with it. Now, like by the 6th or 7th Kickstarter, I know what to do. Like I know the formula, I know the format, I know what I need. You know, take your Facebook ads, how much art you need to be able to launch the Kickstarter, what you need to do to get the job done. And now I am happy to be the one that I can, oh, you're doing your first Kickstarter here. Let me tell you what I was taught, and let me pass that knowledge on to you. But yeah, I'm not nervous anymore, you know?
Yeah, I should mention, I'll put them up in wherever it is, but I have done an interview with Levi and Adam, so I'll put both of those here.
Wonderful dudes, super fun to hang out with, just well springs of knowledge, and just, you know, cool as the day is long.
Cool. Let's get back into the Devil in New Jersey. Now, I'm a hockey fan, and the New Jersey Devils. Does it come? The name of the team, does it come from the legend and lore of the New Jersey Devil?
Yeah, loosely. You know, it's kind of right over the plate, being the Jersey Devil. But yeah, the Devil in New Jersey takes place in the Pine Barrens, which is centralist Jersey. It's a deep wooded area that goes on for like ever. And the story is that's where the Jersey Devil lives. And so, you know, for me, this one, you know, I'm constantly proud of the work that we do. And in book over book, I'm like, this is the best thing we've ever done. I'm the most proud I've ever been of anything I've done. But this one's the most personal to me, because I wanted to tell a story that really reflected the idea of being young and being in a band and feeling like you had no one else in the world but your friends, so much so that you're willing to go into the dark forest at night to try to rescue one of them when something you find a mysterious VHS tape that you see your friend getting abducted by a monster, and then now you're gonna go into the woods like a crazy person. Like, but you would do that as a kid. Like as an adult, as a 44-year-old man, I'm like, I don't know. I like to go to bed by like 11 o'clock. Like the woods are scary at night. I don't even like to go camping. Like, you know, but it's just the spirit of youth and, you know, coming up in the punk rock scene, you know, truly being there for your friends and, you know, come what may. And that was the spirit I wanted to bring to the Devil in New Jersey.
Cool. And I see we got the Van Helsing's logo on the back of the one vest there. And just that, I mean, it's got that Stranger Things, but older kid Stranger Things vibe.
Yeah. So, you know, it's cool that you mentioned that. So there is a through line that goes through the stories, right? And it's subtle. This is how we do world building. Like, you know, in nice. Escape from Point Nemo, Dahlia Wong is the bass player of the Helsings, and she goes on the trip because, you know, it's this billionaire has got this yacht. He's going to bring famous people with him to, like, you know, be in this documentary. So once you get to the future, the Helsings, the band that Dahlia Wong was in, was this crazy revered band, you know, that is the reason why they named the band the Helsings. But this is 1993. This is before Dahlia goes to get on the boat. So that, you know, these are kids who are just fans of the Helsings. And like, you know, when you're a kid, like in New Jersey, you paint the Crimson Ghost from the Misfits on the back of your jacket. So it's the same feeling, the same vibe as that. So
it's like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure with wild stallions forming the basis of civilization.
Exactly. So it all, it's all connected.
Cool. And I love these, once again, the overhead maps, and especially the maps of the, I guess, the Pine Woods.
Yeah. You know, the Pine Barren map came out great. So up until all of our major books, so Rocket, Point Nemo, Devil in New Jersey, Children of Uma, the maps, with certain exception, were all done by Skull Dixon. Skull's an amazing artist, and when you tell him what you're looking for, he just comes up with all these crazy ideas and really adds like a depth. Like, you know, look, there's Polaroids that give you the close-up look of the areas that you're in. And it's pretty cool. Sally designed that sigil that you see at the top. And when I say certain exceptions, in Children of Uma, there's two maps that I did. One was a street map for a city, that I got like a grid for a city, and I just put a bunch of stuff in, which I put a bunch of Easter eggs in there for my friends and places that I'd been and places that I'd loved that are no longer there. And then I did a fire chart, a fire exit map for one scene in Children of Uma, as if you were in like a recording studio, and it's like, well, this is where the fire exits are, as the map, because I like to try to do clever stuff sometimes. It's a little left of center, but yeah, he does the maps. He did the lodge maps, which came out just amazing.
And then we've got some other kind of screen captures there. I'm trying not to spoil too much, so I like early in the adventure these kind of images come from. But I just loved the black and white art. Is that Sally?
So the guy holding his guts is Sally. The split screen ones are all Charles Ferguson Avery, who's just also amazing. He just did an Assassin's Citadel, which is he's just Charlie Avery, man. He's an artist. But the one with the guy holding the guts, we started doing a thing where one of the tiers in our Kickstarter, it's a high-end tier, but you get to you die in the game. We call it an epic death scene, where we will kill you off in the game in the most gory and grisly manner fashionable, and the character will look like you. So that one, the one character that with the guts is this dude Jay I know, in Children of Uma. It was just this dude I've never met before who he ended up it's double page spread of him getting ground up in like a compactor. It was nasty, but it's a one of a kind experience. That's why we charge a lot for it. But whenever you open that book, you're like, that's me, I'm dead.
Cool. And I didn't know that about the Kickstarter, and I also didn't know that was his guts. I thought that was something else. So now it has extra weight to the image.
Been disemboweled.
Yeah. And then you moved into the Wild West. And so that was a kind of departure from your kind of typical genre. Can you just do the backstory? Is this something you always wanted to do?
Sally came up with the story idea for the Sunset Limited. She did the cover. The other picture with the guy shooting at the guy on the horse, that's Whack, who's done some other work for us. He's done the cover work and a lot of interiors in The Devil in New Jersey. He's done a lot of the interior work in the cover. We did the cover work for Mini Submania. Nick Tafani did the cover work for The Devil in New Jersey. But Whack's been working with us a lot, doing interiors. He did a lot of work inside Devil, did a lot of work inside Mini Sub, did some work here in the Sunset Limited. But yeah, Sally had this idea for a train heist. Her and Geo were just kind of riffing on, you're there under the guise that you're protecting the train, but you're there to rob the train. And once you get a little further down from car to car, you realize that not everything is what it seems. And it turns quickly from Western to horror. So it's pretty cool. So that one, is one of the ones that we're in the process of finishing up writing. That ended up having a lot more moving parts to it. So we just mailed out the Devil in New Jersey. We are just waiting for the proofs to come back, and then we're going to order the full boat on the holiday action double feature and get that shipped out. So this is going to ship out a little after, but it's going to be so worth it, because we just Geo just wrote a bunch of crazy stuff for it. And and that's the thing with Geo. He comes to me sometimes, he's like, hey buddy, what if we did this? And so we were supposed to do horror after Escape from Point Nemo, but he's like, I want to tell this story that I have, Children of Uma. And so we did that. And then he's like, well, I have this other idea to do it underwater in Mini Submania. So we did that. And then, him and Sally were like, what about this on the train? So now we're doing that. They're both extremely talented people, extremely great to work with. And the beautiful thing about working with your best friends and being your own publisher is that when someone has a crazy idea, you can just say, all right, let's do it. Let's try it. Let's see what happens. And what happens is some really amazing stuff.
And then you also did this holiday special to some of your backers, Hard Times on the Back Nine and Kevin Saves Christmas.
So, so these are Geo. Geo was like, you know, Kevin Saves Christmas, we actually released once already, PDF only, just to people who backed us in our first year as a thank you. Because we made a little extra money, and it takes place in the island of Point Nemo after you've left. Kevin the Amphicora is trying to save Christmas and brings like a bunch of historical figures through space and time to help him fight Krampus on the island. So I was like, we should do something with that. And so, April 1st is my birthday. April Fool's Day was coming up, and Gio was like, I have a great idea for another holiday special. It'll be an April Fool's Day special. And I was like, all right, well, what is that? What would that be? And he goes, let's do a mini golf adventure. Now, like a Christmas adventure, I could wrap my head around in the moment, because we've seen Christmas action movies, like you can make it happen. But a mini golf adventure, I was like, well, how? And he's like, I don't know, we'll figure it out. And he had the broad strokes of the idea. So we put our heads together and we wrote Hard Times on the back nine. Hard Times, obviously, a little nod to the American Dream, Deathly Rose, and your twin siblings. Your grandfather was the world's greatest mini golfer, and he only got that way because he sold his soul to the devil. And so you have to play 9 holes against the devil's champion. And I actually wrote mini golf rules for 3-2-1 action. It is not, oh, you're playing this action game that happens to have mini golf in it. No, you actually play miniature golf in this adventure. No kidding. Because I had to figure out how to come up with miniature golf rules. Otherwise, it would have just been kind of a waste, Yeah. And if you want to check out the mini golf rules on our Drive-Thru RPG, there is a solo play adventure with the miniature golf rules called A Ham and Egg in Hell. It's free. Download it. But yeah, so we did that, and then I was like, well, if we're gonna, he's like, what if we also did Kevin Saves Christmas? We'll get a new cover. We'll get some more art for it, and then we'll release it. We'll do a holiday action double feature. We'll release it at the same time. So we had Zach Giolongo do the covers for both. All the interior art is Zach Giolongo. The maps are done by Tim Burns, who did all the vehicle art for Children of Uma and Mini Submania. And then the maps in Kevin Saves Christmas is me as Kevin, using my goddaughter's crayons and paper, drawing these island maps, as if I was Kevin the Amphicora drawing the island maps. So that was pretty fun.
Cool. And I guess as we kind of wrap up here, your journey from playing to designing, and now you've got a bunch of titles underneath your belt. Any kind of advice for people that are aspiring to be game designers themselves?
Yeah. I'm very lucky because it's me and Geo. So he and I are equal in everything we do. We co-write things together. We co-produce all these books together. Generally, if he comes up with a cool idea, I'll just go, all right, yeah. We'll just go do that. I have ideas and story stuff that pops up, and then he'll be like, okay, let's go do that. And then we back each other's play. So it's great to have the support of each other. But that's the dirty secret of most independent publishers, is that it's only ever really 1 or 2 people. So my main advice is give yourself a little grace, because you're more than likely doing everything yourself. Accept up front that it's going to be a lot more work than you think. It's going to be fun. It's going to be super fun. It's going to be super rewarding at the end. But the road there is going to be bumpy a little bit, because there's always that one other thing that you didn't think of that suddenly you need to do, that you're like, oh, I need to have these images formatted this way, or I need to call an actual printing place like Mixam and go back and forth to get this book printed. Logistics. You are essentially, as a person who's creating your own stories, an independent publisher, and there's going to be growing pains, and that's okay, because the more you do it, the better you get at it. I mean, there's stuff that I still my pudding brain is like, oh, I forgot that, but like anything else, like learning an instrument, playing a sport, you get better as you go. So just give yourself a little grace, and always give yourself a little more lead time than you think you need. Like we started doing a thing where now with our Kickstarters, we're realistic about like, it's going to take about 9 months to deliver a book, to get the PDF, and then it'll be like, another month or two after to get the physical copy to people. But that's only because printers are, you're beholden to what a printer can do at the time and the printer's availability. But you will get better at it. You will enjoy it. Tell the stories you want to tell. Just don't worry if you think that it's something that people would want to buy or want to play. You got to be your first fan. You got to pop yourself first if you're going to have any hope of getting anybody else excited about playing games that are written by you. And then I would also say, like, just be nice. You're not Daddy Hasbro. You don't have an actual deadline. All that stuff is artificial. When you're working with artists, when you're working with other writers, when you're working with people in any aspect of the business or just in life, just be nice. Have a little patience. Know that most people are going to be working with you. This is like a part-time gig for them. So, everyone has lives. You do too. Just take a beat.
Cool. And we just skipped off of the Vintage RPG podcast, but I mean, it's one of my favorite podcasts. It's a go-to. I listen to it all the time. You and Stu together. And so that is obviously a big part of your life. And you guys put out basically about an episode a week, correct?
Yeah, we do. We started out as bi-weekly, but after a few months, we started doing weekly episodes. We haven't really missed many. Just a couple times when like life got in the way, we couldn't get an episode out in time, or we had technical difficulties when we switched from one server to another. But generally, every Monday morning, you can count on a new episode. We've been doing it. It'll be 5 years, July 7th, that we've been doing this show together.
Wow. So, are you running out of material, or that's what my my partner, she keeps asking, like, aren't you done interviewing people? Because like there can't be that many game designers out there. And I'm like, no, I'm just still finding new cool stuff.
Yeah, no, there's always new cool stuff. Nah, I don't think we're ever going to run out of material. I think there's going to be a point where, like anything else, it's going to run its course. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. I mean, we've been going strong for 5 years. Built an incredible fan base that we are grateful for. Got a killer Discord community that we'd love for you to be a part of. Like, we're having a blast with it. We still enjoy hanging out. We still enjoy talking to each other about it. I'm happy to do it again. I was getting burned out because I was editing it myself. Now that I pay an editor, I don't care anymore. I'm happy to talk. Shout out to Alex.
Cool. And so what's next up for you in the next 6 months to a year? You got more games lined up, more ideas coming?
Yeah. Fantasy. We're doing a fantasy.
Well, you're going to take on D&D. The OGL put them on the ropes.
No, we're going to do 3-2-1 action, but a fantasy version of 3-2-1 action. We got all the rules already for it. We just got to finish writing up Sunset before we could dive into that and do the story on that. But I want to say end of July, early August, we're going to kickstart our fantasy 3-2-1 action. We're going back and forth on what the name is going to be, but yeah, it's going to be fantasy rules for 3-2-1 action. And then after that, I don't know what we have past that, but I think that we're going to do one more Kickstarter this year, probably another horror, but we got to tighten up fantasy first.
Cool. Well, John, I just want to say, thanks for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure kind of learning your history and your process on game design. And for all those at home listening, in the description, there's going to be links to everything that you want to know about 3-2-1 action and John and all of his great work that he's been doing. So just, once again, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thank you for getting up early to accommodate my schedule. I had a great time chatting with you, man.